So probably not Francisco. In fact, someone who's eaten a nugget, imagine how many spices and condiments there are on that thing. So if we have the comparison of an actual nugget with one grown in a laboratory, we're going to see a huge difference there.
Welcome to MeatsPad. In collaboration with the American Meat Science Association, it's a platform dedicated to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the global meat industry. On each episode, you'll have the opportunity to listen and learn from meat specialists and professionals about the whole meat industry. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation, Ultrasource, equipment and supplies for the meat and food industry, Viscofan Collagen Casings, the best alternative to animal gut casings for a better taste and sustainable sausage making.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. My name is Francisco Najar. I'm your host today. We will be doing a little bit different that we've been doing on the Spanish channel for quite a while, translating some of the most relevant episodes onto Spanish, so there are folks in Mexico, folks in Latin America, they can also enjoy those conversations that we have with meat industry leaders in the U.S. and Europe and everything in English. But now I think it was important to start, and this is a very unique episode that we recently published on the Spanish channel with the Dr. María de la Salud. She's a faculty and researcher from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Was a very one of most of the largest universities in Mexico. She's doing a lot of work on lab grown meat, and I think it's she's going to provide very good input on this topic. And we're going to talk about some of the market growth for this segment. And I think she has a lot of good data to share with us today. Welcome, Dr. María de Salud. It's been a while since we were planning this episode, but we welcome you to MeatsPad.
Hi, Francisco. Thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be here and to speak with you.
We can perhaps start this episode by going from the known to the unknown. Maybe we can start, and not only lab-grown meat, but we can start perhaps on what are some of the alternatives of protein. We can talk about plant-based. We can talk about ultra meat. Let's just start with those foundations, and then we can go from there to continue this interview.
Well, like I said, it's just really wonderful to be here with you. And this topic, I have been talking about cultured meat for a while now. It's called cultured meat. This is the word that people are agreeing on. They don't say in vitro meat. They don't see laboratory meat. The definition is now set, and it's cultured meat. So this term is talking, of course, about cultured meat and cellular agriculture. This term includes precision fermentation, the traditional way of making tofu, making other soy products. And that's the precision fermentation that has been used for quite a long time in the pharmaceutical industry. And this has to do with biomass, and this is a very important way of producing proteins. So traditional fermentation, of course, has existed for a long, long time, but precision fermentation is very interesting, and we have companies now creating milk without cows, eggs without chickens. So it's very interesting. And within this cellular agriculture, we find the cultured meat that is created cultivating cells. And then we have another new area, which is insect protein powder. And this is quite the competitor for traditional meat. And these are products that are vegetable-based. And this is taking up a big part of the market. And there are quite a few people all over the world who are eating these vegetable products, and they are mimicking meat with these products. They can even have them sort of look like they're bleeding and things like this. So this really has taken off, and this is quite the competitor for the meat sector. Of course, really nothing to do with the traditional markets and how big they are, the like 14, 15 times smaller than the traditional markets. So it hasn't really taken off that much, but there are people like Tyson Foods who are investing in them, and they are making insect protein powder. There are companies that produce this powder, the insect protein powder, to feed pigs, and this happens in Mexico. But this cultured meat is another topic. All of this alternative protein that exists, this is a bigger market. $2.1 billion has been invested in cultured meat. So we've been looking at the predictions for this, and they're saying that by 2050, we're going to have $13 billion industry by 2050. And this is coming from the meat industry, both in Europe and in the United States. Brazil is investing in this as well. JBS has been investing heavily in this. $60 million to develop cultured meat, and this news came out a couple of days ago. And so we really need to put our back into it and start looking at how we're going to be producing this cultured meat in the future.
Excellent. And I enjoyed one of your seminars, and I think that one slide stuck to me when you mentioned from 2015 to 2022, there's been some companies have been funded, but we're going to talk about this number, $2.1 billion invested in this technology. And then perhaps we can start or move to this. Like we have seen industry, and not necessarily the meat industry only. Some companies that are wanting to explore new technologies, and we could talk about also other countries that have started the production of culture meat. But I think it's good to bring this up. It's there is some funds that are primarily used to do research on this technology.
Today, I can tell you that in two different places in the world, people are eating cultured meat in Singapore and Israel. In Israel, they have their own company. It's called Future Meat Technologies. And they have a B series financing for funding. And now they have $347 million in funding. And they've been selling cultured meat since 2020. So what happened in the United States, Eat Just, one of the largest companies of this type in the United States, did not receive approval. So they went to Singapore to sell their cultured meat. They got the okay from the government in Singapore, and they've been having that going on since 2020. So in 2021, they officially started producing this cultured meat. So I don't want to say that Israel was the first, but they're both working on it.
Excellent. This is great. And I think we can also discuss a little bit about like more in depth about this technology, what a culture meat is. We had the opportunity to visit Patsy Lorumbe. He's out of Spain in Pamplona. His company name is Cocus, which we had also a very interesting interview, an episode. We visited his facility in Pamplona. We visited Patsy in Spain, and we learned from him and from this amazing group. Is a multidisciplinary group that he formed. People from a lot of backgrounds that come together to and not necessarily a culture meet, because this group off of trimmings, we call it, they form muscles. So they have what they call a meat printer, like coming off of a real meat trims, and they've done this to make shrimp, to make uh, pork loins, to make ribeyes. It's very unique, and I want to for those guys that have not listened to this podcast or this video, I will be translating that into Spanish. But it's interesting and how the world, how the global food industry, you will, is looking at this. And I think I would like to know more about your perspective on this topic and looking at maybe in 5, 10 years, where's this going?
Well, what's going on with these products? Some people are disgusted by this type of activity. They're worried, people are worried in general about the feelings that people are going to have with this cultured meat because people have not gotten on board with it apart from those two countries that I mentioned. And we don't have any studies so far that have been carried out about how people feel about cultured meat. So people, when they want to know about how it's made, they understand that we get muscle from an animal, and then we get satellite cells from that animal that have very specific parameters, and we have a differentiator in the cells that we're using. And this is very controversial in terms of the development of this science. In fact, people have found a solution to using these cells from live animals and having to go back again and again and take samples from them. And now they're using what is called immortalized cell lines. So it's a problem if I have to go back all the time for a tiny little piece of muscle from an animal to start culturing the meat from there. So a couple of weeks ago, the United States did give approval to sell this meat. I think it's in California. Upside Foods is the company that before was known as Memphis Meat, but these do have a facility to make 200,000 kilograms of cultured meat per year. And so now they're approved in the United States. And that means they're also going to go to other states. They're going to North Carolina. They're building another facility there. They have an investment to work with, and they're going to be producing 10,000 metric tons per year of cultured meat. I don't know if you've heard about the first artificial hamburger. Dr. Post was the one who created that, and he made his own business around this. But the problem is that in Europe, using immortalized cell lines is not approved. So this guy was the first one to create this meat, and he wants to be in the United States so he can work on this as well and sell it there as well, but he needs the approval. And he's gotten more than $160,000 in funding. Before, Good Meat, which was formerly Eat Just, have funded so much of their activity, and they're the ones who are in Singapore right now. Cocos, these people still don't sell anything, but they continue to invest. And this is the Spanish government who invested 5 million euros in this project. In Catalunya, this is what I was going to tell you. The private investment has gone down a little bit. They're sort of nervous. They've been investing for a number of years and they really haven't sold very much. But now the governments are investing in this. For example, Deloitte, you know Deloitte, it's an international company, it's a consulting company. They're constantly analyzing the products that are coming out in the market. And they talk about a vicious circle that's going around in terms of traditional meat. And then they're saying that it's a virtuous circle when you're creating cultured meat. So the landscape, if you put the product landscape of alternative meat into Google, you will see a map that comes up of hundreds and hundreds of companies in the world that are trying to get this going. I heard something about this in a congress as well about cultured meat. And one of these companies was in California, Maastricht. And this company owner has 70 cows. And every week he says the most difficult thing for him is going through all the well-being tests for their cows to make sure that they can continue to produce. And what is he doing? He is using immortalized cell lines. And so there's a difference in those cells. You always have to go back, though, to the same place to continue to produce. So there has been an obstacle that science is trying to get over as it develops cultivated meat, cultured meat. And that has to do with the fetal bovine serum. Imagine, so we're going to be creating cultured meat and then we're going to be using fetal bovine serum? That's just unthinkable. We're not going to be able to do that at all. So there are people who are looking for alternatives. And in the United States, what they do is take blood, as if you're going to donate blood every certain period of time. And what happens is the platelets in the blood have all kinds of development and growth factors for cells. So according to what he said, that's what he's using. And who's going to be the first one to sell pork meat? It's going to be the Chinese. So the majority of the products that are made are nuggets. And so this is something that is very structured. And people say that they have 70% of it is cells. But we know that there's more fat, there's meat. But what they do is put little pieces in there and produce a type of meat. And what they're doing with the fetal bovine serum is they're injecting it with, for example, vitamin B12, and you just inject it straight into there. So, it's logical they would have to have amino acids as well and proteins because you have to feed those cells. But this really is something that people, there are tons of studies that have been done, and it's like, what do consumers want? And what do you think? What do you think is going to go over with consumers? But no one's done these nutritional studies on this cultured meat or of the chemical composition. None of that has been done. So in 2 places in the world, like I said, where they've been approved, that's where they are creating and selling the cultured meat. So that's what's going on there, Francisco. And these processes, they're really not being open about them. They're not telling you if it's a sustainable process. There's like brutal competition among these companies. There are studies where they have been looking at life cycles. And this is a tool where you use it to understand what are the environmental impacts on what is being produced. That has been done. And so what they tell you is, they're using less energy. Bioreactors are something that really come in a serious way. They also have to have sterility. It has to be refrigerated. It's just like a meat industry. And so what is going on? Well, of course, yes, they are using less land. They're using less water. For sure, that is happening. You don't need so much space as you would with traditional meat activities. So what they were saying is that with 1,500, we would have enough plasma to make enough meat to feed the whole world. But truly, we're actually not in the development phase of this science where we can say, we're going to be able to feed the world, because it's extremely expensive to be making this meat. But we have to remember that all of these inputs are coming from the pharmaceutical industry, which are extremely expensive. But we can understand that everyone is developing this at the same time. I don't know if you know precision fermentation. Did you know that term? This is a way that we can produce proteins. And normally what you do is, engineering, where the gene sequence of a protein goes inside of a bacteria on yeast, and then it's put into a fermenter. The bacteria goes in there. What does it do? It produces the protein. So what I was saying to you is that for feeding people, people are using different types of way to build the same thing, like beer is created with yeast at the same time. Or for example, a company like Impossible Foods, lots of people have eaten that. Lots of people have eaten the Impossible hamburger. And so what did they do? They had a fermented hemoglobin under fermentation to make those vegetable hamburgers that actually look red as well. There's also every other company that also makes egg products without chickens. Or, for example, the company Perfect Day, and this is sold in Mexico. This is a milk product that is made using precision fermentation and that does not have any cow involved. It's mixed with water, then there's some sugar, and then we say, here you go. We have a cup of milk for you, and no cow was involved. So, this precision fermentation is how people are going to be creating food and cultivating cells, and that's the same science that is used to make cultured meat. So, all of these new technologies are around that are making the cultured meat, and there's going to be more technology that is development. I mean, this is a little bit in the future, but it's coming for sure. So it's still far away, but it's there.
The mission of the USMEF is to increase the value and profitability of the U.S. beef, pork, and lamb industries by enhancing demand for their products in export markets to a dynamic partnership of all stakeholders. Simply put, USMEF is putting U.S. meat on the world's table.
Yep. And I do believe and personally believe in the advantages. I mean, we can look at there's obviously some cons, but I think the use of soil that could be something to consider. But I think I would like you to to tell us a little bit about the USDA inspected or the USDA grant that I think the stamp, not the grant, the stamp. How to control, how to inspect meat that is produced in the lab.
Francisco, this has happened. The USDA, the FDA, they've been working on a protocol to inspect these types of products, and they've been working on this for a number of years. And just last year, they were talking to a company that wanted to make nuggets, and they said, "Oh, we don't have any comments on that." And then we had the approval of the legislation that was going to make it happen. So they know exactly all the things that have to come together to make that happen. Just last year, we looked at the steps that had to be taken from the raw materials, the providers. They have to control everything. It's a little bit of a different process, but all of the bottling, the labeling, all of that stuff has to be the exact same as any other industry. So they are worried. They were saying that because of some of these studies, for example, if you have cultured meat and you are going to be comparing it to chicken and how it's traditionally made, then they're saying 17% less is going to be used with this type of cultured meat. And so for beef, those numbers go way up. Pork is a little bit lower. But, Francisco, this is something really interesting. I was listening to a panel the other day, and this is an annual national organization for Mexican meat scientists. And what we talked about was the statement that was made in Dublin. So many meat scientists have found this, I think. If you go in there and you look, you can see there's still enough time to sign this Dublin statement. And what it seeks to achieve is that we give some of the information out to people because there's so much fake news around this topic. So what they did is choose a bunch of scientists who were reading true information on the impacts of this type of industry. And this is how this Dublin statement got developed. Pablo Manzano from northern Spain was involved. Pablo told us the following. We're still in time to produce this meat and produce that meat, and we're saying, oh no, let's produce beef because it contaminates more. And then we took a look at the role of beef cows, cattle, and they are of the utmost importance for the earth to absorb carbon. and also to control temperatures. This is super interesting. We have to take a look at the studies they've done in Africa and Europe because people back long time ago were just living in forests and cows were around in all of the forests. And so what we do is we're blaming them for all of the problems that we have. But there are cycles, millions of years that the earth has been going through these same cycles.
Yep, I know. We can talk about intensive or extensive production when it comes to livestock and its impact on the soil.
The cows are not the ones who are actually the problem. They're taking some garbage feed and turning it into a high quality product. So Dr. Manzano was highlighting the history involved in beef production and taking a look at people's conception that beef cows are the ones that most contaminate. But they are of the utmost importance for people to continue to have ruminants fertilizing the earth and just being right there to accompany people along with how they live. They just have a fundamental role in doing this. There's a lot of interesting information that we've seen on this because we say if we cut a life cycle of an animal, let's kill them younger, let's sacrifice them younger, and then they're going to contaminate less. But everything that's going on now comparing like cultured meat and traditional meat, in theory, two newer ways of creating cultured meat, there's something that doesn't line up there.
And the other aspect of this is like perhaps, I don't know, maybe five or more realistic 10, 15 years, this might be more profitable than it is right now. But I think I would like to also understand what do you think about palatability? We talk about caucus, like with Patsy, but I think it's good to understand your perspective on how close are we going to get to real meat or to meat that is just traditionally produced versus meat that is produced in the lab.
So, probably not Francisco. In fact, someone who's eaten a nugget, imagine how many spices and condiments there are on that thing. So, if we have the comparison of an actual nugget with one grown in a laboratory, we're going to see a huge difference there.
And one of the other opportunities is, I mean, in terms of muscle fibers and how do you mimic the same eating experience? I think that's another interesting aspect of this to it might be an opportunity or but I'm sure there's also a lot of research on how to mimic this, I mean, having the same eating experience.
They have technology, and we have other people who are engineers who have been working on this as well, and they are printing meat with 3D printers. So we're not saying, oh, this is exactly the same as traditional meat. No, we're not saying that. It's a meat that has been injected quite a bit, but it's very far from real meat. But when you bite into it, it actually feels like meat, and you chew on it and it feels like meat. It has connective tissue, even though it's vegetable connective tissue. So when you print out that meat, what you're doing is you're using dyes. And so this is a mix of proteins, all kinds of different proteins in there, peas, soy, all kinds of vegetables in there, vegetables. And so you put vegetable fat on there. That's another type of dye. And that's a little bit more solidified. And then you have a structure that is made up of fibers. And this, yeah, they're going to get to that for sure. For example, cultivated, cultured salmon, that's something that has been approved to eat in the United States. And I saw a study in Mid Science, by Harmon, and what they were saying is, why do alternative proteins, why are they not going to disrupt? Why are they not going to do anything to the meat energy? And then they did a very interesting analysis in there. So normally I would say that the flavor is something we haven't analyzed enough in vegetables. In insects, bad. But what about the environmental impact? There's a lot of things that we don't know there. So there's some things that are less, some things that are more. But when we're talking about health and nutrition, for example, a couple of years ago in our annual meeting of the Mexican meat scientists, we had Dr. Nelson there, we had people from Spain. And we talked about these people. We don't know if it was political or what it was, but they were saying, oh, eat 1 gram of meat per week. And it's like, why? Because they continue to associate meat with poor health. And so doctors have to be constantly fighting to recommend that people eat meat. So they talk to you about problems with nutrition. They talk to you about depression. They talk to you about all of these studies that are backing up the fact that meat is going to help you have good health. You're going to have a longer life. You're going to be all around more healthier. So if we put something really delicious and really cheap, or for example, we say, oh, it's just like cattle who are making the problem for the whole world. Well, that's going to be something we have to look into, because the truth, the honest truth, is not that. We have a lot of things that we need to take care of before we need to remove cows from the equation. We need to recycle. We need to do a whole bunch of stuff. We've heard of this for years, and there's inefficiency in the supply chains. But it can get to looking at this niche where people do not want to kill animals. But this is still not very many people in the world today. You know, Francisco, eating vegetables, nobody's going against that. No, of course not. But some people have been paid to say those things. I just work at the university. But I have learned about this. But there are a lot of people who think that we are biased and that we only read literature that supports our views. And then you can say there are other people who are speaking against it. But you know what? There's room for everyone. Let's not let our guard down at all, because there are people who are really doing damage without real data. So we really need to be there to defend in what we believe and defend science, which is what's good for everyone, so that it truly is for everyone. Not just because one or the other has a certain funding available to push their position, but we want to be giving out information that is good for all consumers in the world.
And we have to point out the social media and we have the power of social media, and we talked with Dr. Bass about this and with other meat industry leaders. It's a real issue. People who does not know anything about food science or meat science, they just because they have multiple followers on social media, on Instagram or YouTube, and they just start talking about a topic, and with the a maybe they will have an agenda against meat, or like you know what I'm saying. And it's very easy to sway on consumers' mentality, or to change their way of thinking, in the way they eat and the way they purchase meat products or food products in general. I think it's it's a reality.
And being a professional here in Mexico, you go straight to scientific literature, and it can say one thing, and then you find some other literature and it says the opposite, and that's published as well, and people have referred to it and people have quoted it, and they're saying opposite things. So our job is to be sure that what we're disseminating has real scientific basis. But I don't want to criticize what other people are doing. You know, oh, vegetarian, meat eater. Everybody go along your own path. Let's, at least what I think is, let's defend quality nutrition and improve production so that we can have fewer results so that we can have higher nutritional value. But that's, we're in 2023. And what I've read is that by 2030, we could start to see price parity, as it's called, like comparing prices of cultured meat and traditional meat. A couple of days ago, I saw that vegetable protein achieved price parity in the United States. And it's been quite a few years that they've been trying to get in there because it's quite a niche market.
We're almost getting to the end of this episode, but I would like to know what are some of the expectations or your opinion in the following 10 years or in the near future, if you will. We can talk about the U.S. We can talk about Mexico in general. Also, what's this? And this is not, oh, it might happen. No, this is happening. This we've seen already products. As you mentioned some examples, like this is happening.
From here to the next 5 years into the future in the US, there will be cultured meat being sold for sure in different shapes and colors and sizes. And there will be products that are also not structured, like I think the steak's going to come in a little bit later, but that's a fact. That's happening for sure. And it's like taking one hair out of a cat. It's not going to be a big deal for the meat industry yet. But I look at a scenario where there is a serious world problem where we do have to weigh whether the animals are going to stay with us or not. But that is something that I don't think that's going to happen, not in 5, 10, or 15 years. I don't think there's going to be a true transformation of the meat industry for that time. Hmm.
And you have companies like one of the big largest meat companies that are invested in this. I mean, we can mention some names, but the main companies that we see every year, RMC or like the most renowned. I mean, they're investing in some sort of in this technology, and it's if they're doing it is because we're gonna see it in the near future.
And we haven't talked about the process, Francisco, the real process, like taking out the cells, cultivating them. You also have to scale that. So there are a number of people in a number of industries that are focused on scaling that part of the process. So we did have news recently that they had sold everything because they did the numbers crunching and it just was not coming out. It was not going to make it. So they were going to have to wait 30 years to actually start to see earnings in the industry. And they've already invested millions and millions and millions. So they did have to close that down. I don't have the name of that startup, but that scalability is a huge factor. And you just need so many resources, like a beast full of resources to get that done.
Well, thank you, Dr. Maria, for your time. Again, I hope to sit down with you again very soon. Good luck on all your endeavors, and it was really I enjoy a lot talking with you and knowing your perspective on this topic. Thank you very much.
Yes, the very same to you, Francisco. Thank you so much. And see you next year.
Yes, thank you.